Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Florida College Access Network Summit. How's everyone doing this morning? If that didn't wake you up, I don't know what, whoever's playing that guitar really tuned it up in the middle of that video. But again, good morning and welcome to the Florida Go 2025 College Access and Success Summit presented by the Florida College Access Network. So delighted that all of you are here on this beautiful Friday morning. I'm Braulio Colon. And on behalf of the Florida College Access Network, national and state partners, our staff, and our summit volunteers, I want to welcome all of you here this morning. Today in Florida, more and more jobs require some form of post-secondary education. By 2018, 59% of all jobs in our state will require a high-quality post-secondary degree or credential. Yet today, only 37% of working-age adults have a 2-year or 4-year degree. We must do better if we are going to remain economically competitive as a state and sustain our strong democracy in the 21st century. And we can do better if we all work together as partners across sectors with the shared goal of significantly increasing Florida's college degree attainment rate. The Florida College Access and Success Summit brings together leaders from all sectors for a call to action and around an agenda to improve post-secondary success for all students. Today, you will hear from experts and engage in conversation around state policy trends, Goal 2025, hear about college access and success strategies that are led by the local community, and finally, we will hear from you, securing your feedback on the Florida College Access Network strategic framework that's designed to support local action across our state and across sectors to improve college and career readiness, access, and completion for all students. I want to thank the summit sponsors for making today possible, including Lumina Foundation for Education, Helios Education Foundation, Florida Department of Education, their division of Florida Colleges, the NPR Project, State Impact Florida, New Futuro, and of course our home and founding partner, the University of South Florida. In October, the Helios Education Foundation awarded USF with a planning grant to support the development of Florida's first collaborating network of national, state, and local partners committed to increasing Florida's college degree attainment rate from 37% to 60% by the year 2025. The Helios investment was then matched with support from our partners at the Lumina Foundation and the Florida Department of Education, all of whom recognize the urgency of improving post-secondary degree attainment and who understand the value of cross-sector collaboration as the key to moving the needle during a time of shrinking budgets. And while these financial and human capital investments from our partners are vital, the Florida C.A.N project would not be possible without the institutional support from the University of South Florida and the remarkable forethought of the USF leadership acknowledging that improving higher education to meet the demands of the 21st century requires a coordinated statewide response with all sectors serving as active partners in improving college and career readiness, access, and completion. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce the Executive Vice President and Provost for the University of South Florida, Dr. Ralph Wilcox.
Well, good morning, and on behalf of our 47,000 students, more than 10,000 faculty and staff, and nearly 250,000 alumni, welcome to the University of South Florida, a high-impact global research university dedicated to student success. Recently named as one of just 5 up-and-coming universities to watch out for by the Washington Post, last weekend, we awarded more than 6,000 degrees to USF students, and we'll award another 6,000 degrees in August and December of this year. At the same time, we celebrated our rise into the National Science Foundation's top 50 research universities, becoming just the second institution, public or private, in the state of Florida to achieve such heights. So today we're absolutely delighted to serve as host of the Florida College Access Network's first Student Access and Success Summit, one that brings together elected officials, business leaders, philanthropic organizations, as well as representatives from the K-12 community, state colleges, ICUF institutions, and the state university system, with a singular commitment to ensuring that the proportion of working age adults in Florida with a high-quality post-secondary education increases from 37% to 60% by 2025. The convening of this summit couldn't be more critical at a time when the United States continues to witness a decline in its worldwide competitive position, and Florida is struggling along the path to economic recovery, new job creation, and re-employment. We all know how important a well-educated and highly skilled workforce is to an optimistic future. That's why other nations today, such as China, India, Malaysia, Singapore, and Brazil, are investing so aggressively in the recruitment and cultivation of their own talent pipelines, while focusing so much of their GDP on building higher education capacity. Of course, we've heard all the explanations and the excuses in this country. Americans have become far too comfortable and have lost their competitive zeal. American companies have moved offshore, shrinking employment opportunities at home. Our K-12 system is broken, particularly in science, technology, mathematics. A 19th and 20th century instructional and learning paradigm in our universities just doesn't work today. College is too expensive, especially as a more diverse population seeks increased access, and that government has abandoned higher education. While the most likely explanation for today's post-secondary malaise in Florida and across the United States is to some extent all of the above, the fact of the matter is, if this nation is going to compete successfully in the global marketplace of the 21st century, and Florida is to build a robust and diversified economic base that reaches beyond the past, agriculture, tourism, and growth, then we must work together now to seek a novel and sustainable solution, a new paradigm, if you will, for a bright future. Florida College Access Network is, as many of you know, an outgrowth of the Enlace initiative that laid down its roots across Tampa Bay more than a decade ago, thanks in large part to the Kellogg Foundation. Expanding into Enlace, Florida, with local hubs at USF, UCF, FIU, FAU, and later at UF, FSU, and UNF, today's emergence of C.A.N as a member of the nationwide College Access Network is in large part attributable to the vision, passion, and tireless efforts of Dr. Paul Dosell, our Vice Provost for Student Success at USF, Braulio Colon, the generous support of the Helios Education Foundation and the Lumina Foundation, and communities across the state that have stepped forward. What's become clear to us over the years, at least in Florida, is that government can't do it alone, nor can schools, colleges, and universities. Partnerships are our best hope, and that's why the many important voices in today's discussion are so very, very essential. It wasn't too long ago that when we spoke of post-secondary student success, we simplistically and perhaps even myopically, focused our attention on retention and graduation rates at college. Today, and rightly so, we speak of college readiness, the K through 12 pipeline, affordability and access, attainment and completion, relevance, a novel idea in universities perhaps, relevance and competency, placement, employability, earnings, and indebtedness, all being essential ingredients, and that's reducing indebtedness, all being important ingredients to student success. So, faced by a complexity of issues, we surely cannot expect an easy answer. Assuming then that goal 2025 is non-negotiable, and I sincerely hope that is the case for the sake of future generations of Floridians, then together we must find solutions to the problems before us. Too few college graduates, especially in the STEM field. Too many college stop-outs, dropouts, and non-completers. Skyrocketing tuition rates limiting access. Outward migration of talent from Florida and the United States. College debt that exceeds credit card debt. And American universities, particularly research institutions, that are losing their luster in the world of higher education. Today and for the future, we need a new paradigm in higher education funding, delivery mechanisms, and accountability. The taxpayer and student, as well as business and industry, must seek a more balanced investment in high quality and globally competitive higher education. We, the providers, must be more strategic in meeting the needs of society, business, and industry, delivering, and here's that word again, relevant and meaningful education, avoiding unnecessary duplication, embracing emerging technologies to optimize access, personalized learning, and online learning communities, and to meet the needs of a changing student demographic. Most of all, we have to acknowledge that the oft-portrayed idyllic world of the 19th and 20th century land-grant university finds rapidly diminishing relevance today. You might know that this year we're celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Morrill Act that established land-grant institutions in the backwaters of many states. But today, as population centers demand a more relevant and inquiry-based education characterized by real-world, applied, and translational research, we have to change our ways. Of course, that's not to say that every institution in every system of higher education must aspire to be a research powerhouse, for neither is such necessary, nor, quite clearly, is it affordable. In summary, then, our higher education focus today, and I believe the same goes for our K through 12 system, must be on building a talent supply chain for Florida's future. We must hold ourselves accountable for preparing, recruiting, retaining, and, of course, supporting the best and brightest students, teachers, professors, scientists, and engineers, both from within Florida and beyond, for it is now clearer than ever that an intellectually curious, talented, creative, and innovative workforce is the key to our healthy economic future. Perhaps less clearly visible is our destination of Goal 2025. For as you've already heard, with only 37% of Florida's working age adults having earned a post-secondary credential, and only one county in Florida today having a rate of more than 50%, and 20 others at less than 20%, we can expect a long journey ahead of us. So to help us map that future this morning, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Elected to the Florida House in 2006, Representative Will Weatherford has demonstrated his understanding of the challenges facing Florida's future and the essential role that our schools, colleges, and universities must play in shaping a bright future for the state. Respected on both sides of the political aisle as a leader of tremendous integrity, Representative Weatherford is known to be a quick study of both people and policy, which likely explains his rapid ascent to the Speaker's chair at the advanced age of 32. Or perhaps it is his commitment to the concept of truly representative government and servant leadership that has helped raise this Jacksonville University graduate to such political heights. Please join me in welcoming the next Speaker of the Florida House of Representatives, Will Weatherford.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilcox. That was a very kind introduction. I can't beat that. I can't beat Dr. Wilcox. He is just a phenomenal communicator. I thought you did a tremendous job setting the table, so to speak, for this this conference and this summit. And I want to thank you. I also don't have the inflection or the voice that Dr. Wilcox has. I'm not. Where'd you get that, in Southern Alabama? I'm not sure, but you did a great job. I'm honored to be here. I really am. And before I kind of dive in and start talking about some of the issues I think that we're challenged with, and hopefully some of the solutions, I want to set the table maybe in a little different way, in the sense that, why do we actually care about education? You know, why is it so important? Why have we put such a high value on it as a society and as a citizenry? And I've thought a lot about that, and clearly everybody cares about education. But the reason, to me, we should care about it, and we do care about it, is because it is the only way we have found to bring people out of poverty. It is the only way to take a generational, cyclical, poverty-stricken environment, people, individual, society, and to have them rise above it, and to be productive, and to have wealth, and to participate in commerce. That's what education is. It is the vehicle of which people can come out of whatever circumstances they come from. And 80% of the world, your life is dictated to you. You have very little flexibility in what you're going to be and what you're going to do. And predominantly the reason for that is because there is not equal opportunity on the front end when it comes to education. And so that's what we believe in. I do not believe in equal outcomes, because I think people are different. I think when competition comes into play, there are winners and there are losers. So I don't believe it is our job as educators or as policymakers to try to determine who the winners and the losers are. What our job is to create an opportunity at the front end so that everyone has a chance. And it's up to that individual, which is where personal responsibility comes into play, decides whether or not they want to take advantage of it. If you were to look at the last 100 years, there have been more people that have come out of poverty because of what I believe capitalism and free markets around the world than in the history of the world. Just in the last 100 years, billions of people have come out of poverty, communities, nations, continents. But here's the thing, free markets and capitalism can't do it alone. And if you have there are a lot of examples of countries that have had free markets and have had tremendous commerce and capitalism, but if you don't have an educated society, it doesn't matter. They have to go hand in hand. You have to have people who have the skill sets in combination with the liberty and freedom that allows them to make decisions that are best for them and their families. That's what America is. That's what we created. And the question is, are we going to be able to continue to hold on to it? I believe we need a vision for higher education in this state and in this country. The governor has created a task force right now that we are in the process of formulating that is going to take a holistic look at the education system, the higher education system in the state of Florida. I believe the reason he has created that is because everyone recognizes that we are producing a better talent pool out of our high schools. It's not as good as it should be, and we have a long way to go, but we are doing better. And the question is, what are we doing with that student? What are we doing with that talent pool that is coming out of our education system at the K-12 level and coming into our universities and our colleges around the state? There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. There's uncertainty in Europe. There's uncertainty in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of things that we don't control. But what I can control and what the state of Florida can control is we can provide a vision for the direction of the state of Florida, regardless of whether or not Greece can pay back their debt, regardless of whether or not the United States of America and Washington, D.C. get through their partisan bickering and figure it out. We can set our own direction and our own goals and create a pocket of prosperity right here in Florida. And I think that's what we should be doing. With all the talk of job creation, there is no question that education and job creation is inextricably linked. I think everybody here would agree with that. Job creators never say, you know, I'm looking for a state where I can take my workforce in a place where the graduation rate is 47%. Do you know a state that does that? Or I'm looking for a state where nobody has the skill set that is needed for the business that I have or the jobs that I'm looking for. I mean, nobody is going to go to a state that doesn't have a talent pool that meets what their needs are. I mean, it's a very basic thing. But we have got to make sure that Florida is providing what the 21st century job market is looking for. In today's economy, the greatest predictor of whether or not you can get a job is your education. There's no question about it. I'm going to give you some data points to prove it. Our nation's unemployment rate for Americans with less than a high school diploma is 12.8%. For African Americans, it's double that. It's double that if you're an African American without a high school diploma. For high school graduates with no college education, there's an 8.5% unemployment rate. And for college graduates, it's 4.2%. So the moral of that story is pretty simple. If you have an education and if you have a degree, you can get a job. Even in the worst economy that this country has faced since the Great Depression, you can get a job if you have a degree. That's why this is so important. That's why the goal of 2025 and 60% of Americans having some type of credential or degree is so important. It is a hedge, it is a protection against some of the challenges that our country and our states face. Businesses are now forced to adapt and to innovate, and so should our education system. We should be embracing technology and challenging antiquated notions about how our students can be educated. Consider this for 1 second. In 2010, the top 10 jobs in demand did not exist in 2004. Not a single job in the top 10 list of jobs that were actually available existed in 2004. Now, what that basically means is that our education system, our university system, our college system is now trying to produce a talent pool for a job that does not exist yet. Think about that. That's where we're going. So what type of skill set, what type of student, what type of education do you have to create to give someone the flexibility and the adaptability to change in that type of environment? It's pretty dynamic. And it's a holistic change in the way that we have to educate. The first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that our university and our college system, both private, public, and not-for-profit and for-profit, are aligned with the market demands of the private sector. And I have to admit, I actually believe the reason that there is such a window of opportunity for the for-profit education system in this country and in this state is because our publics have not done a good enough job of aligning the degrees that they're producing with the job market that actually exists. They've got to do a better job of that. In addition to driving businesses, we know Increasing access to quality education also increases the quality of life. This past legislative session, we had a $70 billion budget, and we focused on things that you can imagine are what our basic needs are: roads, healthcare, transportation, education. One overlooked aspect of our budget, though, is that 42% of the general revenue that we spent went towards healthcare, and predominantly Medicaid. I'm going to explain to you why that's important. 6 years ago, when I got elected, we spent $12 billion on Medicaid. Today, we spend 24. 6 years ago, when I got elected, we spent about $19.5 billion on education. Today, we spend about 21. I don't have to put a chart up for you to explain that one, do I? When you create a society where you're spending more on people who cannot afford for health care because they're underemployed or unemployed than you are investing in your next generation, you're losing. And that's where we are. And just so you know, it's not the fact that the state of Florida lawmakers don't want to invest in their education system, although I think we should do a better job of it. We are mandated by the federal government to provide for Medicaid, and that is our match. And so as more people have gone on the unemployment rolls, as more people have had challenges, personally, it has forced us to spend more on Medicaid and taken that money away from other areas such as education. It is the biggest challenge we face in our budget as a state. And not only Florida, every state across the country. But our data shows, in regards to Medicaid, that the people who are utilizing these services are the ones who are the most uneducated. Okay? So what that means is the more educated you are, the more self-sufficient you are, and the less that the state is having to spend on you. We don't want an entitlement society. We do not want that. We've seen that. It doesn't work. When we spend more money, as I said, on education, on Medicaid than education, that is a problem. These are in large part people whose income level are below poverty rate. And so we've got to find a way to break that cycle, and there is no other way aside from giving them an education and opportunity. That is it. That is the way that we bring them out of their poverty. Take a look at the numbers. According to the U.S. Census data, a high school dropout earns $19,000 a year on average. A high school diploma raises to an average of $28,600 a year. A college degree will nearly double your earning potential at $51,500 on average today. Double your earning potential. Now, my point in saying all this is very simple. America can solve its problems not through government programs, but through education. Education can solve a lot of these challenges we face that government cannot. That's the point. Nobody wants to be on food stamps or live in subsidized shelter or have subsidized health care. Nobody wants that. The American dream is not to grow up and live on a bunch of subsidies. That's not what people dream when they're young about their potential as a human being. What they dream about is the freedom and the opportunity to chase after the things that they care about. And education is the only venue that actually offers them that. In order to provide students with more access to quality education, we have to continue the reforms that Governor Bush started back in 1998. And this is not about K through 12, but it is our feeder system, and I think it's proper to spend a few minutes on it. In 1998, nearly half of Florida's fourth graders were functionally illiterate. Half. They could not read. Today, 72% are reading. We have narrowed the achievement gap for Florida's African American and Hispanic students. In fact, no other state in America has closed that achievement gap more than the state of Florida over the last 10 years. Last year, Florida's high school graduate topped 80%, 10 points higher than it was just 5 years ago. We have increased accountability for students and for parents and for teachers across the system. And in my opinion, the reason that we have had the success is because we've had accountability, we've had forms of measurement, we've had choice, and we have innovated with technology in our education system. Again, a long way to go in our K through 12 system, but we have made tremendous gains. And those are the reasons I think that we've made them. But K through 12 is only the beginning, as we all know. We're only halfway there. This is why we are now focusing so much on our higher education system. We're working with the Board of Governors, the Board of Education, our non-for-profit colleges and universities, our for-profit colleges and universities to come up with a model that makes us more globally competitive. The current model right now in Tallahassee, I can tell you, is broken. Because what it's basically funded on And the way decisions have been made is based on who went to what school, parochial because this university is in my district. Everything has been based on what one or two people have wanted over the last 25 or 30 years. It's been politics at its worst form. There has been no central mission that has been focused, and we have to change that. And frankly, that's where the Board of Governors and that's where the Board of Education comes into play. They have to provide that vision. The reason we have given a lot of our authority to the Board of Governors and to the Board of Education when it comes to governance is to depoliticize decisions that are being made about our higher education. It is too political, frankly, when you put it in the hands of people like me. It is, because you're getting pulled on by your local university, you're getting pulled on by your alma mater, and you end up making political decisions, not policy decisions. And so we have tried to depoliticize that as much as we possibly can. Indeed, we need to develop a system where certain universities can play to their strengths and complement each other. There is a $4 billion investment every year that we put into the higher education system in this state. We have to make sure we're getting the best return on that investment. Whether we like it or not, higher education and the forms of delivery is changing rapidly. We can change, we can embrace that change, or we can fall behind the other states who are embracing it now. As you all know, we have a capacity problem in Florida. In order for us to get to that number, 60% by 2025, we do not have the existing infrastructure to do so. I believe that the best way to do that is through online learning. We cannot build enough buildings to deal with the demand that exists. And even if we could afford to build them, which we cannot, it's not necessarily what the consumer is demanding. We must embrace change. And embracing change means embracing technology like online learning and embracing the disruptive innovation that is coming into the higher education marketplace as we speak. We have to get outside of our comfort zone and think about education in a completely different way than we have in the past. There was an excerpt that I'm going to read to you that I read in the Wall Street Journal. David Brooks wrote just a tremendous article that was called The Campus Tsunami. I'm just going to read you a piece of it and what it said. But it said, this week Harvard and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology committed $60 million to offer free online courses from both universities. Two Stanford professors have formed a company, Coursera, which offers interactive courses in the humanities, social sciences, mathematics, and engineering. Their partners include Stanford, Michigan, Penn, Princeton, and many other universities. There are other elite universities, including Yale and Carnegie Mellon, that are moving aggressively online. President John Hennessy of Stanford summed up the emerging view in an article by Ken Aletta in the New Yorker, and he said, there is a tsunami coming in higher education. What happened to the newspapers and the magazines in this country can also happen to higher education. It will be a re-scrambling around the web. Ladies and gentlemen, that is real. That is happening. This is going to happen. The question is Florida going to lead or are we going to follow? Is America going to lead or are we going to follow? This is going to happen. Think about this. Only 25% of all students in the state of Florida are what we call traditional students. So when we think about a student, we think about a 19-year-old who's so excited about their future and they're going to move on campus and live in the dorm and go to the football game and join a fraternity or a sorority and get involved in all these clubs. That's what we visualize higher education to be. That's 25%. 75% are people who have a job, are people who are coming back to school, are people who take care of their parents because maybe one of them is ill, are people who may be taking care of a sibling because they don't have anyone else to help, and so they don't have the flexibility to go to school on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, starting at 8 a.m. till 2 p.m. That's the real world. That's the real dynamic we're facing. 75% of our students are non-traditional, and that does not mean that we should forget about the traditional form of education that we have. We should not. We should embrace it. We should continue to revel in that tradition that we have. But we have to recognize there is a marketplace out there and a demand for flexibility in the education network. In Tallahassee, we've started a conversation about how Florida will become the national leader in online education. And I believe it includes the state creating the first online public university. There are currently Lots of online programs at our state colleges, state universities, at our for-profit colleges and universities, at our not-for-profit colleges and universities. But there is no one single entity that the state is involved with that their core competency is to deliver and to develop online learning in the best platform you could possibly imagine. There's no one really doing that. We all provide it, but we're not competitive. And as I just explained, the rest of the world is going that way. So to get started, we've asked the Board of Governors to work on a task force, and our hope is that it's going to be taking shape here within the next few weeks. We have already led in online learning in K through 12. As of today, we have over 120,000 students enrolled in the Florida Virtual School. The next highest in any state, at which I think is Michigan, is like 40,000. We are blowing the country away when it comes to online learning in K through 12. I think it's time for the state to take it to the next step in our university and college system. It's time to bring the same principles of technology and how we're learning there in K-12 and bring it to the next level. Steve Jobs once said that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. He was a great man, one of the best innovators in the history of the world. We have an opportunity to invent our future. But more than that, we have an obligation to invent our future. I'm excited about this summit. I'm grateful that y'all have put this together. I'm very honored to have been here and be a part of it. Thank you for what you're doing. Let's all go out together and invent the future for Florida's education. Thank you.
Representative, would you be willing to entertain a few questions? We have microphones available right here to your left, and one on each side of the stage here for questions.
Hi, I was wondering, I was hearing also about edX that Harvard and MIT and so forth are doing, and I heard a show where they were talking about online education, and somebody was saying, well, do you think that these new for-profit companies' degrees are going to be competitive with the degrees from private education and so forth? And his answer was very interesting. I wanted to get your perspective on it. He said, I think actually that's the wrong question because degrees are obsolete. The idea that people are going to get prepared in 4 years away from life for the rest of their lives may have been appropriate 10, 20, 50 years ago. But because, as you said, the jobs that people are going to need don't even exist when they graduate from a 4-year college, more and more it's going to have to be ongoing education. And that's education people can't take time away from their jobs to do. A reason that online education may be particularly critical, but I'd like to get your thoughts particularly about whether degrees are actually on their way out.
It's a very bold thought, and frankly, not outside the realm of possibility. You know, I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. There's something to the fact, a degree or a credential, there's something to be said for starting something and finishing it and having that stamp of approval saying you did it. At the end of the day, the marketplace will decide whether or not a degree matters. The marketplace right now is deciding whether or not an online degree matters and whether a for-profit degree or a not-for-profit degree or a publicly subsidized degree or a degree from Harvard or a degree from Florida is valuable. They are the final arbiter on the value of that degree on your wall. But I think before we get to a point where degrees are obsolete, I think that's probably a ways away. That could happen to some extent. Maybe some degrees would be obsolete. I think getting a degree, a law degree, I think is probably going to still be important if you want to be a lawyer. A medical degree, I'm hoping, will still be important if you want to be a doctor. But I do think that the value that is placed on a degree and where it comes from is going to be dictated by the marketplace. And I think you'll be surprised in the fact that, and I'll throw a statistic out to y'all that is probably inappropriate now that I'm on a university campus, but it's true. The average student graduating from a Florida college, so Hillsborough Community College, Pasco Community College, or State College, that student's earning $10,000 more per year than a student graduating from University of Florida today. Did you know that? Now, what they will tell you, and there's legitimacy to this, that student is a different student. They're 10 or 15 years older. They have a lot of work experience. They are coming back to get a credential or a degree. But my point in that, just because you have a degree from the University of Florida or the University of South Florida does not guarantee you a job. The skill set and your ability to go out and market that skill set will determine your job in the future, I believe. And so it's probably going to land somewhere in the middle of what you're saying and what I was saying. I don't know where, but I think it's a very thought-provoking idea, and is probably not outside the realm of the possibility in my lifetime.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Please state your name and the organization you represent when you're
Do I have to?
question. Please.
He represents a company that's eliminating degrees. They don't offer degrees, so just kidding.
Brent Ellis. I'm a project director for a Title III HSI STEM grant at Hillsborough Community College. I like your comments about online learning, and I believe that that is the way of the future. What is Florida's plans for recruiting and retaining the quality faculty to help facilitate all of these online courses? Because one of the things with online is you can't ever remove that human element of the facilitated educator.
It's a great question. I do not, and I want to be clear, I don't necessarily think that online learning is going to replace the current delivery system we have today. I just think it can supplement it. If right now only 43% of Americans have working Americans have a degree, and we want to get that number to 60%, I'm just saying the current delivery system can't get us there, and that online is going to have to be a large component to that. To get back to the other question, I think I'm drawing a blank on what he actually said. This does happen to me from time to time. The recruiting, yeah. The challenge there is not all professors and people who have been in their field for a long time feel comfortable teaching in an online format. I mean, it's a different skill set. It's a different type of teaching. And so I think we're on such the front end of this debate and this idea of expansion of online learning that it's almost hard to predict how that arms race is going to take place. Look, I think we're in an arms race. I mean, there's no question we're competing against other states for talent. And we have had a brain drain in the state of Florida, largely due, frankly, to cuts that the legislature has made and the fact that we have the lowest tuition in the country, that we brag about in campaign time and then we frown about when we wonder why we don't have a top 50 university. So, or maybe we do, but barely, okay? But I mean, in reality, you know, the reason that we've fallen behind is because we have not made the investments in higher education, and we've been scared to make the tough decisions on tuition. I'm very supportive of our governor, but I do think that the bill that the legislature passed that gave tuition authority to both Florida and Florida State and gave an opportunity for other universities like USF to get there was a good bill. And my hope is that we work with them in the future to come back with it, because we cannot compete, whether it's online talent or a classroom talent. We are not able to compete if we don't have the resources to do so. It is an arms race, and to me, students will follow the best, particularly online. I mean, particularly online, if you have the choice, if you want to get a certain degree and there is someone out there who has just a tremendous expertise in that field and is a great teacher and everybody has access to them, why would you go pay for that? Why would you go get a degree from somewhere else if you know that there's someone you want to follow? So I don't know the answer of how we're going to do it, because we're so early we're in such early stages of this, but we're going to have to follow it. I think that, you know, the earning potential for a lot of the professors is going to go up. I mean, if you're in high demand and you've got 4,000 people taking your online class, you ought to get paid for that. I mean, I think that the best and the brightest and the cream will rise, and I think they'll be compensated for it. So I think you'll see a big marketplace for it, and the cream will rise to the top. That's a really long answer for a very simple question. I'm sorry for that.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Rebecca Brewer with Anthem College in Orlando. What are the plans for streamlining GED preparation and obtainment, since ability to benefit funding is ending in June?
Is I don't know a good answer?
If that's the real answer.
I am familiar with what you're talking about, and the lack of funding. And there's a way that we have funded the GED programs, and how it's kind of an adult learning program. We do it mostly through our high schools, but some of them are through our community colleges. And there have been some challenges there with funding. I don't know the answer of what we've got some folks here from the Department of Education that could probably talk about that in greater detail than I could. So I honestly don't know the answer to that. I'm sure we have one. It may not be a good one, but we do have one somewhere. I need to find out, but I'll find that answer for you, okay?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stacy Carlson with the Helios Education Foundation. I wanted to go back to something you just said a few minutes ago about higher education institutions needing more resources to be able to become more competitive. And I'm curious to know how you balance that with the need of low-income students to be able to access post-secondary education. If we keep increasing tuition, how do we ensure that those students who are unable to pay are able to access it?
Yeah, first of all, we have to make sure that a portion of that tuition goes towards more need-based aid. Secondly, we need to reform Bright Futures, and this may be heresy to my party and to people that believe that Bright Futures should be available to everyone. But the fact is, the revenue source for Bright Futures is shrinking. The demand for Bright Futures is growing, and so we can either make it a number that it gets so small that it becomes insignificant to everybody who gets it, or we can target it to the people who need it the most. And so to me, that goes to my theory, not my theory, my belief in equal opportunity, not necessarily equal outcomes. So we're working on that. That'll take some pretty bold action by the legislature to go that direction. We're going to look at that in the Florida House. But also to kind of answer your question on affordability, online, there's, not to go back to that, there's another, right now, I'm going to break the code for some people here, and I don't want to offend anybody in the university system, but look, they subsidize their higher their graduate degrees and their more technical degrees with, the freshman and sophomore year. There's a reason why there's 400 students in one classroom. When you go into that freshman, Econ 101 or, English 101, there's four. And look, because the university makes money off of that class, and they're able to then go and help subsidize other classes that are more expensive and have smaller classrooms. Online, what would you prefer? Would you rather go to a classroom where 400 people are in there of your best friends with a teacher that you can barely see at the end of the room? Or would you rather sit in your room on a computer, watch them, communicate with them online, and learn at your own pace? I mean, maybe everybody feels differently than me, but I know what my answer is. And so to me, there's a way to make education cheaper. One of the challenges we have and why I think we need an online university of some sort as opposed to it being an offshoot of every university is because they use online learning as a subsidy as well. They make money. They all make money off of their online learning programs because they're easier to deliver, and they use those resources to subsidize other parts of the university system, or of their university or college. And I just believe, if we do believe in affordability, if we have to make online learning more affordable, it shouldn't cost as much to learn online as it does to show up in class every day. And I'm not saying that, there's a manipulation going on. It's the reality of any business. You have to sometimes have lost leaders one place so you can, pay for something somewhere else. But I think we have to look at that whole model. And there's a way to do it and make it affordable, and hopefully we'll figure that out.
We have time for one more question.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
My name is Carlos Salgado, and I'm the director of Familia, a organization that dedicates to family education, the relationships, to improve their quality of life within the family. I would like to hear your thoughts about the impact or effect of online education in this kind of education.
Maybe I'm not sure if I understand that right.
Okay. The way we educate our families is by working with the whole family together, working with the community together so they understand what relationships are about. And I'm kind of concerned about the trend of online education and what it's going to do with interpersonal relationships and the growth of the family and the community.
Yeah, that's a challenge now. Every once in a while I look around my house and I'm on my phone, I'm reading something on my iPhone, and my wife's on her iPhone, and my daughter's on the iPad. I'm thinking, okay, this is not how a family's supposed to work. This is not right. There's no question technology is having an impact on interpersonal relationships. But it's not going to slow down. It's not. It is fascinating that if they have all these polls that they do. I don't know who these people are that do these random polls and get information, but read this once. It's very fascinating to me that people have more access to